What if the very things you thought were keeping you alive were slowly killing you? The sun had barely risen, but Helen Parker was already sweating through her cotton gardening gloves. 62 wasn't old, not anymore, but some mornings she felt like she was dragging around 80 years of tired bones. Her back ached. Her knees crackled every time she crouched. Still, the garden gave her peace. She had grown these tomatoes from seed, and watching them thrive made her feel like she still had some control. The weeds didn't stand a chance against her. She yanked one up with a grunt, tossed it aside, and suddenly the world tilted. Just a little at first. The sunlight pulsed too bright. The sky seemed to shudder. Her breath caught in her throat. Then it all went gray. When Helen opened her eyes again, she was flat on the mulch, the smell of crushed basil in her nostrils. A neighbor hovered, face twisted in worry, voice far away. An ambulance was already on the way. The ride to the ER was a blur of beeping machines and polite urgency. Inside the white-walled exam room, the doctor's face said more than his words ever could. Your blood pressure is dangerously high. Your cholesterol too. Honestly, you're lucky you didn't have a heart attack. He paused, then added the words that would rearrange her world, Mrs. Parker, if you don't make some changes, now, you're not going to have many more garden mornings. You need to take this seriously. Today. Helen didn't cry. She never did. Not when her husband left 20 years ago. Not when she worked double shifts to pay for her daughter Katie's college. Not even when she was laid off just 6 months before retirement. But this? This quiet sentence in a sterile room? It hit her somewhere deep. Still, she nodded like she understood, like she was ready. But inside, she wasn't sure what to do. Later that night, back in her little house in Pasadena, Helen sat in her kitchen staring at a half-eaten plate of meatloaf. Her favorite. The one she always made on Sundays. Extra butter in the mashed potatoes. 2 slices of salty, fatty bacon draped over the beef. Her doctor's words echoed like a siren in her head, but her hand kept moving toward her fork. She wanted comfort, not confrontation. She pushed the plate away. Her phone buzzed. A notification. A YouTube video autoplayed with the title, Over 60. For worst meats you should never touch and for you must eat daily, Elon Musk. Her eyebrows lifted. Elon Musk? The Tesla guy? SpaceX? What did he have to do with meat? She clicked. A calm voice began speaking over a flashy intro. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Helen scoffed and shook her head, but her hand didn't move to close the window. She listened. The voice continued, now more serious. You might think you're eating smart. But if you're over 60, there are 4 meats slowly destroying your heart, your gut, your brain. The same meats approved by outdated health standards. The same ones causing inflammation, stroke, memory loss, and fatigue. And the worst part? Most of us eat them every week. Images flashed, bacon, deli ham, charred burgers, canned beef stew. All of Helen's favorites. All staples of her life. The voice continued. But there's hope. For meats, clean, rich in omega-3s, anti-inflammatory, can change your entire biology. Daily intake can reverse damage, restore energy, even turn back the cellular clock. Helen sat frozen. Was this real? Was this just some overproduced health nonsense, or was there something more? She remembered a conversation long ago, one that felt like a dream now. Summer of '96, a conference in Palo Alto. She was 33, brilliant, overworked, and one of the only women in a room full of male engineers. That's when she met him, Elon. Not the billionaire. Not the Twitter fiend. Just a young guy with too many ideas and not enough sleep. He had been a speaker, a guest from a startup no one took seriously. They had lunch outside on the steps. She remembered him saying something strange, prophetic even. You can engineer rockets or apps, Helen. But biology? That's the real frontier. One day, we'll all be hacking our own health. She had laughed. Told him he sounded like a lunatic. He had grinned. Watch me. Could he have been behind this new health thing? She clicked the link in the video. A PDF opened, labeled, The 4 Worst Meats Over 60, How to Save Your Body from the Inside Out, approved by Musk Nutrition Labs. Her hands trembled slightly as she read the list. Bacon. Deli ham. Charred red meat. Canned meats. All of them linked to high blood pressure, bad gut bacteria, and chronic inflammation. She read it twice. She didn't want to believe it, but the science wasn't new. It had always been there, she just never wanted to look. The second half of the document listed alternatives: wild salmon, grass-fed lamb, organic turkey, pasture-raised chicken. Meats she rarely bought because they were too expensive, too unfamiliar, too millennial. But now, they seemed like keys to a second chance. Still, part of her resented it. Why did everything have to change? Why couldn't she just enjoy her bacon and meatloaf without guilt? She stood up, went to the fridge, opened it, and stared at the rows of plastic-wrapped deli meats and microwave meals. She closed it without taking anything. Sleep didn't come easy that night. Her body ached, but her mind was louder. Was this really the beginning of something new, or was it just another guilt trap in the never-ending stream of health advice? She remembered the YouTube voice again: what's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? She didn't know. She had spent so many years surviving, getting by, raising Katie alone, working, grinding, that she didn't remember what it meant to move forward. To hope. The next morning, she found herself opening a notebook she hadn't touched in years. She wrote one sentence: change starts at 62. Then she underlined it twice. The doorbell rang. A small package lay on her porch. No return address. Inside, a book. Cream-colored, heavy, textured cover. The title in gold foil: Meat and Mind, The New Science of Aging Well. A sticky note inside read: I remembered you. E. Her breath caught. Elon. Couldn't be. Maybe someone from the conference days. A colleague? A prank? Her mind raced. She flipped through the pages. It was a manifesto of sorts. Detailed studies, personal stories, graphs, bold claims, but all backed by evidence. At the end of the first chapter, a single quote: you are not your past meals. You are what you choose to eat next. Helen set the book down. Outside, the sun was rising again. Her garden waited. She looked at her gloves, still lying in the dirt from the day before. She wasn't sure how to begin. But maybe this time, she didn't need to have all the answers. Maybe she just needed to keep going. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Helen Parker had always been one of those women who carried herself like she had a compass inside her, sharp-eyed and quietly commanding, even when the world around her seemed lost. She hadn't cried in decades, hadn't let herself spiral, hadn't once said, "I can't," out loud. Growing up in Detroit, the daughter of a machinist and a school secretary, Helen learned early that emotion didn't buy you groceries, and pride didn't pay the electric bill. Her mother used to say, "The world doesn't wait for tears, honey, only results." Helen lived by that creed. She didn't just excel in school, she broke records. First girl in her high school to ace the state math championship, first woman in her engineering program at Michigan State to lead a robotics team, and later, the first and only woman under 40 to be awarded a postdoctoral fellowship at one of Silicon Valley's most elite bioengineering labs. But there had always been a cost. The late nights, the skipped meals, the coffee instead of sleep, the soda instead of water, and the fast food instead of anything resembling real nutrition. For most of her life, Helen believed in performance, not balance. Everything was about output. Deliverables. Metrics. If you were tired, you worked harder. If you were sick, you hid it. If you were a woman in a lab full of men, you didn't dare show weakness. She had met her husband, Dan, during her second year of grad school. He was a mechanical engineer, charming and disorganized, the kind of man who made everyone laugh and somehow got away with never answering emails on time. He grounded her, at first. They built a life. A daughter. A house with mismatched furniture and cluttered countertops. But over time, the very traits that made Dan lovable became unbearable. His lightness became irresponsibility. His warmth became absence. He left one spring without a real goodbye. Just a note and a suitcase gone. Katie was 9. Helen didn't have the luxury of collapsing. She became two people, mother and father, engineer and homemaker, disciplinarian and comforter. She cooked while debugging code. She ran conference calls with one hand and checked Katie's math homework with the other. She didn't date. She didn't party. She barely even remembered what she used to like. People said she was a hero, but Helen didn't feel heroic. She felt exhausted. For a long time, she and Katie were close. Inseparable even. They shared books, argued about movies, went hiking on weekends, made lasagna every third Sunday. But as Katie grew older, the cracks widened. Katie became a vegan in college, majored in environmental science, started protesting animal agriculture and preaching about whole foods. She told Helen she was addicted to processed food, that she was slowly killing herself with every sandwich she ate, every soda she drank. Helen heard judgment, not love. The harder Katie pushed, the more Helen dug in her heels. Their last fight had been on Helen's 61st birthday. Katie brought a gluten-free, soy-free, sugar-free carrot cake and made a speech about climate change at the dinner table. Helen told her to stop treating every meal like a TED Talk and maybe just enjoy the night. Voices were raised. Doors slammed. Katie didn't come to Christmas that year. They hadn't spoken in 8 months. Now, as Helen sat at her kitchen table staring at the mysterious book with Elon Musk's name tied to it, she realized something unsettling. Maybe Katie had been right. Maybe the body she thought was durable, the one that had carried her through so many storms, was already rusting from the inside out. She thought of the bacon in the fridge, the stack of frozen dinners, the cans of chili she bought on sale. She thought of the fatigue that had crept in slowly over the last 2 years, the way her knees throbbed after climbing stairs, the way her brain felt foggy after lunch, how often she needed to nap now, even though she never used to. And more than anything, she thought of the look on the doctor's face. Not pity. Not fear. Just blunt concern, like he'd seen this same story too many times to be shocked anymore. She opened the book again. The chapter titles read like warnings carved into stone: Your gut is not your enemy. Inflammation, the silent saboteur. The myth of meat, what the labels don't tell you. Reclaiming your cells. Each section was written in plain language but backed by research, real studies, peer-reviewed, nothing fluffy. It cited work from Stanford, Harvard, even NIH trials. There were graphs, timelines, even meal plans. It was hard not to be impressed. And at the end of chapter 2, she found a name that made her blink. Contributing nutrition consultant, Dr. K. Parker. Her heart jolted. Katie. Her Katie. She flipped to the back. There it was in tiny print. Dr. Katie Parker, Ph.D. in nutritional biochemistry, lead consultant for Musk Nutrition Labs. Helen's hands went cold. She hadn't even known. All this time, all these months of silence, her daughter had been working on this. On something meaningful. Something powerful. Helen sat back in her chair, stunned. Her throat tightened. Was this a coincidence? Had Katie sent the book? Was it fate? Guilt? A message? Was Elon somehow involved, remembering their brief conversation all those years ago and connecting the dots? Or was it simply a strange twist of the universe, delivering this book into her hands when she needed it most? She didn't know. But suddenly, it didn't matter. What mattered was that she was being given a chance. A window. A thread to pull. And if her daughter had anything to do with it, then maybe, just maybe, there was still time to fix more than her arteries. She stood up, walked to the fridge, and one by one began pulling things out. The bacon. The ham. The meatloaf leftovers. The canned chili. She didn't cry as she tossed them. But she felt something shift, something long buried. It wasn't just about food. It was about facing the life she'd built around survival. It was about choosing to live differently, not just eat differently. She drove to the market and found herself standing in front of the seafood section, staring at wild salmon fillets. She had no idea how to cook fish. She bought it anyway. She picked up organic chicken, pasture-raised eggs, grass-fed lamb, olive oil. No soda. No chips. No shortcuts. At home, she pulled up a recipe from the book, turmeric-glazed salmon with garlic greens. She followed every step carefully, measuring, chopping, listening to music for the first time in months. The house smelled different, brighter. When she sat down to eat, it felt ceremonial. Not a punishment. A beginning. She chewed slowly. The flavors were new, vibrant. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't have to be. She wrote in her notebook again. Dinner was good. My body didn't panic. She flipped the page and stared at the blank sheet. Katie, she wrote. I don't know if this will reach you, but I want you to know I'm trying. Your work, your voice, it reached me. I'm listening now. I'm sorry it took this long. She didn't send it. Not yet. But it felt good to write. She sat at the table long after the plate was clean, book open beside her, her reflection in the window looking a little clearer than the night before. Maybe this story was just beginning. Helen didn't go to the steakhouse to sabotage herself. That wasn't the plan. She went because she wanted to feel normal. Her friend Margaret had called earlier in the week, chipper and unrelenting, insisting they do a girls' night like they used to. I made a reservation at Chandler's, she said. You need a proper meal and some laughter. Enough of this health kick isolation thing. Just one night, Helen. Please. Helen hesitated, knowing full well Chandler's was one of those indulgent places where the napkins smelled like butter and the menus read like a dare. But saying no felt like admitting she was weak, and Helen Parker didn't do weak. She told herself she could make smart choices. She would order the grilled salmon. She would say no to wine. She would eat slowly, politely, and leave proud. But the moment she walked in, the scent of seared beef and rosemary hit her like a wave. The low lighting, the familiar hum of laughter, the clink of wine glasses, the deep mahogany booths, it all pulled at something in her that was starving for comfort. Margaret waved her over, wearing too much perfume and her usual oversized jewelry, already sipping a bright red Cabernet. You look fabulous, she said. What's this I hear about you going vegan or some Elon Musk meat plan or whatever? Helen sat down slowly, smoothing her skirt, trying to find her footing. Not vegan, she said. Just, being smarter. Trying to eat clean. Margaret rolled her eyes and handed her a menu. You're 62, not 22. You've earned the right to eat whatever you want. I swear, this health trend thing is making people forget how to enjoy their lives. Helen smiled tightly and pretended to read the menu. But it wasn't pretend for long. Because there, under chef specials, was her old favorite, the filet mignon, dry-aged, served with roasted bone marrow and a side of truffle mac and cheese. Her mouth watered just thinking about it. The waiter appeared, young and overly confident, pad in hand. "Ladies," he said. "What are we having tonight?" Margaret ordered first, ribeye, rare, creamed spinach, double whiskey. Then the waiter turned to Helen, smiling. "And for you?" Her mind stuttered. She opened her mouth to ask about the salmon, but what came out instead was, "I'll have the fillet. Medium rare." The moment she said it, she felt a twist in her chest. Not regret exactly, more like defiance. As if part of her had stood up and shouted, "I'll eat what I damn well please." Dinner was delicious. That was the worst part. The steak was tender, rich, perfectly seasoned. The mac and cheese was a sinful miracle of salt and butter. She drank half a glass of wine. She laughed. She let Margaret complain about dating apps and aging parents and her daughter's ridiculous gluten-free lifestyle. It felt almost like the old days, before everything started to feel like a countdown. But the high didn't last. That night, at home, Helen felt heavy. Not just in her stomach but in her chest, her joints, her brain. Her heart thudded louder than normal. She couldn't sleep. Her gut churned, uneasy, like it knew she betrayed something. She tossed and turned, regretting every bite, replaying the conversation, the laughter, the moment she ordered without thinking. In the morning, her face looked puffier in the mirror. Her hands ached when she tried to make a fist. Her blood pressure monitor blinked out a number she didn't like. She wrote in her notebook, "Weakness disguised as nostalgia." Then she drew a shaky line underneath. The next day she avoided her usual walk. She felt off. Like she'd slid backward 10 steps after clawing her way forward. She opened the book again, Meat and Mind, and reread the section about red meat and aging inflammation. It spelled it out plainly. Charred beef raises trimethylamine N-oxide levels, or TMAO, which increases cardiovascular risk and inflammation. Add processed sides like creamy sauces or buttered starches, and you get a perfect storm of aging accelerators. Helen closed the book and sighed. Her cravings had tricked her, and now she felt ashamed. But shame wasn't useful. She knew that. It was just another form of paralysis. What she needed now was movement. Forward motion. She forced herself outside for a short walk. Her neighbor's golden retriever ran up to her and licked her hand. She smiled faintly. The sky was overcast, but the breeze was gentle. She inhaled deeply, trying to reset her senses. As she rounded the corner, she passed the local co-op store. On impulse, she walked in. The shelves smelled like cedar and lemons. A young man with a man bun and tattoos was arranging a display of pasture-raised chicken. She wandered the aisles, searching for something that might cleanse the guilt out of her. She picked up wild-caught sardines packed in olive oil. Organic greens. A bag of turmeric root. She reached for a jar of ghee, then hesitated. A woman beside her said, "That one's good, but if you're avoiding inflammation, you might want the avocado oil instead." Helen turned, startled. The woman was maybe in her late 30s, kind eyes, minimal makeup, gym clothes. "I'm sorry," Helen said. "You're probably right." The woman smiled. "New to the game?" Helen laughed softly. "Let's just say I took a wrong turn at the steakhouse." They talked for a few minutes. The woman introduced herself as Jenna, a yoga instructor and part-time nutrition coach. She told Helen about a local group that met weekly to cook together and swap health recipes. "We've got folks in their 70s who've totally turned their labs around," Jenna said. "You'd be amazed what clean proteins and gut support can do." She handed Helen a card. "No pressure. But we meet Thursdays at 6. Helen thanked her and walked out feeling something unexpected, hope. That night she roasted the chicken she bought, paired it with kale sautéed in garlic and lemon, and made a tea from the turmeric. It wasn't restaurant food. But it felt clean, whole, real. Her body responded quietly. Her mind felt a bit lighter. Before bed, she sat on the edge of her mattress, thinking about the evening. She opened her notebook and wrote, "Tonight, I said yes to health and no to guilt. I think that counts." Then she stared at her phone, debating. Finally, she opened her messages and typed, "Hi Katie. I know we haven't talked. I just wanted you to know I read your chapter in the book. You were right about a lot of things. I'm starting to make some changes. I hope we can talk soon." She hit send before she could change her mind. She sat in the silence, holding her breath. The phone didn't buzz. But that was okay. She had taken a step. The next morning, she woke up clearer. The guilt was still there, but it had softened into resolve. One misstep didn't mean failure. It just meant she was human. And humans could change. She looked out the window at her garden, at the sunlight playing across the basil. A new day was beginning. And this time, she was ready to meet it head-on. Helen had never felt more awkward in her life than she did standing outside the community center on a Thursday evening clutching a tote bag filled with unfamiliar ingredients. She looked down at her own hands, spotted and strong, and reminded herself she had faced harder things than this. She had stood in front of male-dominated boards and defended billion-dollar innovations. She had raised a daughter on her own. She had survived layoffs and loneliness and late-night panic attacks. And yet here she was, nervous about walking into a cooking group like she was a middle schooler attending her first dance. She took a breath and opened the door. The inside of the community center smelled like roasted garlic and something sweet, cinnamon maybe. The air was warm, almost too warm, and the hum of friendly chatter filled the space. People moved about in aprons, chopping herbs, stirring pots, washing produce. The room wasn't what she expected. It wasn't filled with young health freaks or smug lifestyle influencers. There were people her age, older, even. A gray-haired man with a tie-dye bandana was zesting a lemon. A woman with a cane was gently massaging kale in a bowl. There were some younger folks too, chatting easily with their older counterparts, passing spices, laughing over burned toast. Jenna spotted her and beamed, waving her over. "You came. We weren't sure, but I'm so glad you did." Helen gave a tight smile and held up her tote. "I wasn't sure either. But I brought some ingredients." Jenna motioned her to a prep table. "Perfect. We're doing an anti-inflammatory dinner tonight. Wild-caught fish tacos on almond flour tortillas, turmeric veggie slaw, and ginger lime bone broth. You're gonna love it." Helen unpacked her items: avocado oil, pasture-raised chicken thighs, garlic, lemon, and a small jar of homemade sauerkraut she tried fermenting earlier in the week. "You made this?" Jenna asked, opening the lid and giving it a sniff. "Smells legit. You're braver than most of our first-timers." Helen shrugged, but her cheeks warmed slightly. A tall man with deep laugh lines joined them. "This your first Thursday?" he asked. "I'm Greg. I run the fermentation corner, but mostly I just taste test." Helen extended her hand. "Helen. I used to make things that went to space. Now I'm trying to fix my gut." Greg chuckled. "That's not such a big leap. Microbes are the future, you know." The ice broke after that. Helen was handed a chopping board and a pile of rainbow carrots. She peeled and sliced with mechanical precision. Her hands remembered rhythm and order. The conversation swirled around her like a tide, people talking about their first signs of arthritis disappearing, about energy returning, about finally sleeping through the night again. They swapped supplement brands, tea recipes, fasting tips. But it never felt preachy. It felt like a family dinner with purpose. Someone started playing soft jazz on a speaker. A woman in her 70s with short white hair offered Helen a spoonful of mango chutney she'd made. "Try this," she said. "No sugar. Just dates and turmeric and magic." Helen tasted it and closed her eyes for a moment. "That's incredible." The woman grinned. "That's healing." As the tacos came together, Helen found herself laughing more than she had in months. She recounted her steakhouse slip-up, which earned a round of knowing nods and one sympathetic fist bump. "It happens," Jenna said. "This isn't about perfection. It's about pattern." They sat down at a long wooden table to eat, passing dishes, complimenting flavors, offering notes like amateur food critics. Helen took her first bite of the fish taco and felt an instant jolt of flavor, crispy, fresh, balanced. No heaviness. Just clean satisfaction. Her body didn't flinch. Her mind didn't spiral. She felt whole. When dessert came, sliced pears with cinnamon and crushed walnuts, Helen reached for her notebook and scribbled in the margin of a page, "This is what eating is supposed to feel like." After cleanup, Jenna invited everyone to share a win from the week. Helen almost stayed silent, but something in her chest pushed forward. "I sent a message to my daughter," she said quietly. The room paused. "We haven't spoken in a long time. She works in this field now. She helped write a book that landed in my lap at just the right moment. I think it saved me." Jenna touched her hand. "Did she respond?" Helen shook her head. "Not yet. But I'm not waiting in anger. I wanted her to know I heard her." There was a collective breath around the table, like the room exhaled with her. Greg raised his water glass. "To listening. Even when it's late." They clinked glasses, even the young ones. After everyone left, Helen helped wipe down the tables. She lingered by the door, hesitant to leave. Jenna walked over. "You coming back next Thursday?" Helen nodded slowly. "I think I need to." That night, back home, Helen brewed herself a cup of ginger tea and sat on the couch flipping through the Meat and Mind book again. She reread Katie's section. There was a passage that struck her differently this time. Our parents' generation wasn't given the right information. They were told fat was bad and chemicals were fine. They trusted experts who hadn't yet caught up with the science. But now we know better. And we owe it to ourselves, and to them, to build new blueprints. Helen felt a lump rise in her throat. She remembered all the nights she fed Katie microwave dinners, thinking she was doing fine. She remembered mocking her daughter's food choices, dismissing them as fads. She whispered into the silence, "I didn't know. I thought I was doing the right thing." Her phone buzzed. A message. From Katie. Just one sentence. "I'm glad you're trying, Mom. Let's talk this weekend." Helen stared at the screen, her breath shallow. Her fingers hovered before typing, "Yes. I'd like that." She set the phone down and leaned back. Outside, the wind picked up. The garden rustled. Somewhere deep inside her, a door opened. She wasn't the woman she used to be. She wasn't yet the woman she was becoming. But tonight, for the first time in years, Helen Parker felt forward motion. The weekend arrived with a brittle spring chill that made Helen pull her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she approached Katie's apartment. It was the kind of day where the sky hung low and gray, threatening rain but never quite delivering. Helen's heart was a storm of nerves and hope, a whirlwind she hadn't felt in years. She rang the buzzer and waited, her fingers twisting the strap of her purse. When the door opened, Katie stood there, slim, confident, wearing a simple blue sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her eyes searched Helen's face, wary but not unkind. "Hi, Mom," she said softly. Helen's voice caught in her throat, but she managed, "Hi, Katie. Thanks for inviting me. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender and coffee. It was smaller than Helen remembered from childhood visits, but neat and warm. Katie gestured for her to sit on the couch, and Helen sank down, feeling the old weight of guilt and distance loosen just a little. They talked at first about the weather, about small things, the kind of cautious conversation you have when rebuilding a bridge. Then Katie pulled out a photo album from the coffee table and opened it. There, among the images of family trips and birthday parties, were snapshots of Helen and Katie from years ago. Katie pointed to a photo of Helen baking in the kitchen, flour dusting her hair and cheeks. "You always loved cooking." Helen smiled, a genuine one this time. "I did. But I forgot how much until recently." Katie nodded. "I wrote some chapters in that book you're reading, about how food shapes us, our brains, our moods, our families. I want you to know it wasn't just research for me. It was personal." Helen's throat tightened. "I'm sorry I wasn't better at listening." Katie's eyes glistened. "I know. I was stubborn too. But we both have a chance now." They spent the afternoon cooking together, Katie teaching Helen how to prepare a simple bone broth and a salad of bitter greens dressed with lemon and olive oil. The kitchen was small but bright, and the sound of chopping and simmering filled the space between them. Helen realized she hadn't felt this connected in a long time, like the rhythm of their shared labor was stitching them back together. As they ate, Helen noticed how different food tasted when shared with someone you love. It wasn't just about nutrients or health anymore. It was about healing. After dinner, they sat on the small balcony, wrapped in blankets, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. Katie opened up about her struggles, the pressure to succeed, the loneliness of living in a fast-paced world, her own complicated relationship with food and body image. Helen listened without interrupting. She wanted to absorb every word, every nuance. When Katie asked, "Do you think you can keep doing this? The cooking, the changes?" Helen nodded firmly. "I don't want to lose you again. Or myself." The conversation lingered in her mind long after she left. That night, Helen lay awake, her thoughts a tangle of regrets and resolutions. She opened her notebook and began writing. Rebuilding isn't linear. It's messy, slow, but worth every step. The next morning, energized by the visit, Helen set out to deepen her new lifestyle. She returned to the community center's Thursday group, but this time she volunteered to lead a session on simple recipes for seniors. She wanted to share what she'd learned, that you could age with strength, flavor, and joy, without sacrificing health. At the session, Helen spoke with a mix of humility and authority. She talked about the dangers of certain meats loaded with saturated fat and chemicals, processed bacon, greasy sausages, factory-farmed pork, and why avoiding them was crucial after 60. Then she recommended alternatives. Pasture-raised chicken, wild-caught fish rich in omega-3s, lean cuts of beef in moderation, and plant-based proteins that soothed inflammation. The group was engaged, asking questions, sharing stories of their own dietary struggles. Helen felt a surge of purpose. This was more than a diet. It was a movement, a reclamation of health and dignity. Over the following weeks, Helen's life took on new rhythms. Morning walks were longer and more mindful. She learned to savor meals, focusing on textures and colors, not just calories. She started journaling emotions alongside food logs, recognizing patterns between stress and cravings. One afternoon, while preparing a batch of homemade turkey chili, Helen received a call from her doctor. The news was cautiously optimistic. Her cholesterol and blood pressure had improved. "Keep this up, Helen," the doctor said. "You're on the right track." Helen allowed herself a small smile. She knew the road ahead would have bumps, that temptations like Chandler's Steakhouse would linger. But she also knew she wasn't walking it alone anymore. She had friends, a daughter reaching back, a community, and most importantly, a new respect for her own resilience. Late one evening, she opened her notebook and wrote, life after 60 is not about limits, but about choices. Some are hard. Some are joyful. All are ours. And with that, Helen closed the book and looked forward to the next chapter of her life, a chapter filled with possibility. Helen's transformation was gaining momentum, but a creeping unease had begun to shadow her progress. After months of diligently following the advice from the community group and her daughter's book, she felt stronger, more energized, but something didn't quite add up. One afternoon, while browsing online forums dedicated to senior health and nutrition, Helen stumbled upon a thread that piqued her curiosity, an alarm. The topic was, the hidden dangers of popular meats after 60. The post outlined 4 types of meat that experts and nutritionists strongly advised avoiding past a certain age, citing links to increased inflammation, heart disease, and cognitive decline. Helen read the list carefully. First, processed deli meats, loaded with nitrates and preservatives known to increase cancer risk. Second, conventionally farmed pork, often saturated with antibiotics and unhealthy fats. Third, fattier cuts of beef, especially grain-fed and heavily marbled steaks. And fourth, fried chicken, a favorite comfort food, but one often soaked in unhealthy oils and bad chemicals. A chill ran down her spine. It wasn't just about taste or weight anymore. It was about survival. She realized her last steakhouse outing had been a lucky escape. The filet she ordered had been a rare indulgence, but what about the everyday meals many older Americans relied on? How many were unknowingly feeding their bodies harmful toxins under the guise of tradition and convenience? The forum had a contrasting list too. For meats they recommended eating daily or at least regularly, chosen for their anti-inflammatory and nutrient-dense profiles: pasture-raised chicken, wild-caught salmon, grass-fed lean beef in moderation, and sustainably sourced sardines or other small oily fish rich in omega-3s. This was the first time Helen had seen a clear, science-backed guideline laid out so plainly. It felt like a revelation and a challenge all at once. The next day at the community center, Helen brought up the discussion with Jenna and Greg. Jenna's eyes lit up. "That's exactly what we try to teach here. Understanding where your meat comes from and how it's raised or caught makes a world of difference." Greg nodded, adding, "It's not just about what you avoid, but what you replace it with. The body can heal if you give it the right tools." Inspired, Helen decided to conduct a mini experiment for herself. She would carefully track the 4 meats she avoided and the 4 she embraced, noting how each affected her energy, mood, digestion, and sleep. Over the next 2 weeks, Helen crafted meals that incorporated pasture-raised chicken breasts roasted with herbs, wild-caught salmon grilled with lemon and dill, small sardines drizzled with olive oil on toasted whole-grain bread, and lean grass-fed beef in stews and stir-fries. The contrast with her previous habits was stark. She felt lighter, her joints less stiff, and her mind clearer. Even the small bouts of anxiety she sometimes experienced seemed to ease. She realized how powerful the link between diet and mental clarity was. At the next Thursday group, she led a presentation titled, "4 Worst Meats You Should Never Touch After 60, and 4 You Must Eat Daily." She used simple language, personal anecdotes, and data from the book and online research. The group listened attentively, many nodding as they recognized familiar foods they'd been warned about or consumed without hesitation. One woman raised her hand. "How do you deal with cravings for things you know aren't good anymore?" Helen smiled gently. "I've been there. For me, it's about remembering why I started. Sometimes I swap a craving for a walk or a call to a friend. And sometimes, I allow myself a small treat, but I always try to balance it with something nourishing." The discussion was lively, full of tips and shared struggles. Helen felt grateful for the community's warmth and wisdom. Back home, she found herself planning meals with a new sense of purpose. She experimented with recipes from Katie's book. Bone broth soups, fish tacos with turmeric slaw, roasted chicken with garlic and lemon, and shared photos and tips on the group's social media page. Slowly, she realized the journey wasn't just about avoiding the bad meats, but about celebrating the good ones and the life they supported. But the road wasn't without setbacks. One evening, after a stressful day, Helen found herself staring at a package of bacon in the grocery store, the familiar red and white stripes promising comfort and ease. Her fingers itched to grab it. She remembered how easy it was to slip back into old habits. Instead, she reached for a package of nitrate-free turkey bacon. It wasn't the same, but it was a step. That night, she wrote in her journal, "The battle isn't won in perfection but in choices made one meal at a time." Helen's doctor called a few weeks later with good news: her inflammatory markers had dropped significantly. The blood work confirmed what she felt in her bones. This wasn't just about feeling better temporarily, it was about reclaiming her future. Helen's story was no longer just about herself. She was becoming a beacon for others in her community, proof that age was no barrier to change, and that food, when chosen wisely, could be a powerful ally. As she closed her notebook one evening, she smiled softly at the words she'd written, "After 60, every bite counts. Choose life. Choose health." With new resolve, Helen looked forward to the next chapter in her journey, one where knowledge met action, and where the worst meats were truly left behind. The day Helen and Katie planned their family feast was bright and crisp, the kind of spring morning that held the promise of new beginnings. Helen woke early, excitement buzzing in her veins like caffeine. For the first time in years, she wasn't cooking just for herself or for survival, she was cooking for connection, for celebration, for healing. The guest list was small but significant: Helen, Katie, and Katie's partner, Sam. Helen's daughter and son-in-law had welcomed Sam into their family, and though Helen hadn't yet met him in person, she was eager to make a good impression. The kitchen was a whirlwind of activity. Helen moved with purpose, chopping fresh herbs, marinating chicken thighs in garlic and lemon, and preparing a pot of homemade bone broth simmering gently on the stove. Katie unpacked a basket of wild-caught salmon and rainbow chard she'd picked up at the farmer's market earlier that morning. The familiar rhythm of chopping and stirring reminded Helen of the early days of motherhood when cooking was a daily act of love and care. She felt that old warmth rekindling inside her. As they worked side by side, conversation flowed naturally. Katie shared stories from her job at the Health Research Center, the breakthroughs and frustrations. Helen listened intently, proud of the woman her daughter had become. "It's amazing how much we still don't know about food and aging," Katie said. "But it's exciting too. We're just starting to unlock the secrets." Helen nodded. "I'm glad you're leading the way." By midday, the kitchen smelled like a sanctuary, roasted garlic mingled with citrus, turmeric, and fresh herbs. The dishes were colorful and inviting: turmeric-infused roasted chicken, wild salmon with dill and lemon, a vibrant kale and carrot slaw dressed in apple cider vinegar and olive oil, and crusty almond flour tortillas for wrapping the fish tacos. They set the table outside on the small patio, where sunlight filtered through budding leaves and a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming jasmine. Sam arrived just as they finished laying out the food. He was tall, with kind eyes and an easy smile. Helen felt her nerves settle as he greeted her warmly and complimented the spread. "This smells incredible," he said, taking a seat beside Katie. As they ate, the conversation shifted seamlessly between light-hearted banter and deeper reflections. Helen found herself sharing the story of her transformation, from that pivotal steakhouse night to the community center cooking group, to rebuilding her relationship with Katie. Sam listened with genuine interest, offering support without judgment. "It takes real courage to change habits, especially after 60, he said. "Most people give up before they start." Katie reached across the table and squeezed her mother's hand. "Mom's been my inspiration." The meal wasn't just nourishing, it was healing. Each bite seemed to mend the invisible wounds of the past, bridging the gap of years lost to silence and misunderstanding. After dessert, fresh berries with a drizzle of honey and chopped walnuts, they lingered over coffee. Helen looked around at the faces of her daughter and Sam and realized something profound: this table was a new beginning, a place where love and health could coexist. The feast ignited a desire in Helen to host more gatherings, to create a community of food and friendship that extended beyond herself. She envisioned potlucks at the community center, recipe swaps, and perhaps even a cooking class focused on anti-inflammatory diets for seniors. That night, Helen journaled, "Food is more than fuel. It's family, forgiveness, and future." The next weeks unfolded with a steady pulse of progress and setbacks. Helen maintained her commitment to the 4 meats to embrace and avoided the 4 to avoid, but she also learned to listen to her body's unique signals. Some days, fatigue lingered despite her best efforts; others, her mind sparkled with clarity. She embraced the ebb and flow, understanding that health was a journey, not a destination. One afternoon, Helen received an unexpected invitation to speak at a local health conference aimed at older adults. The topic was Nutrition and Aging, Myths, Truths, and Practical Tips. Helen hesitated but then accepted. She saw it as an opportunity to amplify the message that had saved her life and could help many others. Preparing her talk was both daunting and exhilarating. She practiced weaving her personal story with scientific facts, emphasizing the importance of choosing meats wisely after 60. On the day of the conference, Helen stood before a crowd of attentive faces, many of them seniors like herself, hungry for guidance. She shared her journey candidly, the mistakes, the revelations, the challenges, and the victories. She described the 4 meats to avoid, the 4 to embrace, and how food had transformed her body and relationships. The audience responded with applause, questions, and heartfelt stories of their own. Afterward, several attendees approached her, thanking her for the clarity and encouragement. Helen felt a deep sense of fulfillment she hadn't experienced in years. That night, as she sipped chamomile tea, she reflected on how far she'd come, from the shock of a single steakhouse dinner to standing as a voice of hope and knowledge for her generation. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was spiritual and emotional. She had reclaimed her health, her family, and her future. Helen understood now that age was not a barrier but a canvas, a chance to paint a new story, one bite at a time. With renewed purpose, she closed her journal and whispered to the quiet room, "This is just the beginning." Life, Helen had learned, was a delicate balance of triumphs and trials. Just as she began to feel firmly in control of her new lifestyle, a sudden setback tested everything she had built. It was a gray, rainy morning when Helen woke with a heaviness in her chest, an unusual tightness that refused to ease. Dismissing it at first as anxiety or perhaps a lingering cold, she went about her day, preparing a breakfast of scrambled eggs with sautéed spinach and wild-caught salmon, drinking her bone broth with its rich, comforting aroma. But the discomfort grew, creeping from her chest into her jaw and down her left arm. Alarmed, Helen called her doctor, who urged her to come in immediately. The tests revealed what Helen feared. A mild heart attack, a stark reminder that even the best intentions and efforts could be challenged by the wear and tear of a lifetime. The hospital stay was short but sobering. As she lay in the sterile white room, Helen's thoughts churned. Was all her hard work undone? Had she been too optimistic about changing habits so late in life? But even in that moment of fear, a spark of determination burned. She was not done yet. After discharge, Helen's recovery was slow but steady. Physical therapy sessions helped rebuild her stamina, while visits with her cardiologist reinforced the importance of strict dietary discipline and medication adherence. This time, the stakes felt even higher. Helen's daughter Katie visited every day, bringing meals carefully prepared to align with her new heart-healthy regimen. Their bond deepened as they navigated this crisis together, turning moments of vulnerability into strength. Helen also reconnected with the community center's support group, sharing her experience candidly. The group rallied around her with encouragement and advice, reminding her she was not alone in the fight. During those weeks, Helen discovered the emotional challenges of healing were as real as the physical ones. Frustration, fear, and moments of despair threatened to undermine her resolve. But the lessons from her journey, about hope, resilience, and the power of choice, became her anchors. She learned to forgive herself for setbacks and to celebrate small victories. One afternoon, Helen sat with her journal, writing, "The heart is fragile, but so is hope." Both need care. Slowly, Helen adjusted her diet further, cutting back even more on red meats and focusing on anti-inflammatory foods, wild salmon, sardines, pasture-raised chicken, and plant-based proteins. She experimented with spices known for their heart benefits, turmeric, ginger, cinnamon, and found new joy in preparing meals that soothed both body and soul. Her energy began to return, and with it, a renewed sense of purpose. As spring melted into summer, Helen resumed her walks, this time with a careful eye on her body's signals. She invited Katie and Sam along, savoring the shared moments beneath blooming trees and golden sunsets. Their conversations often turned to health and family, weaving new threads of connection. Helen's story even caught the attention of a local newspaper, which featured her as a symbol of determination and the importance of lifestyle change after 60. The article sparked messages from strangers, many sharing their own struggles and hopes. Helen responded with warmth and encouragement, eager to pay forward the kindness she had received. Through this difficult chapter, Helen understood that setbacks were not failures but part of the process, sometimes necessary pauses that deepened her understanding and commitment. She vowed to keep moving forward, one healthy choice at a time, knowing that her journey was far from over but richer for the lessons learned. That summer evening, as she sat on the porch watching fireflies dance in the twilight, Helen closed her journal and whispered to the night, "Every challenge is a chance to rise." After her health scare and slow recovery, Helen found herself standing at a crossroads, not just in her diet or lifestyle, but in the very way she approached life itself. The days of simply surviving were behind her. Now, she craved more than mere existence. She wanted to thrive. Slowly, the heaviness of fear that had settled in after her heart attack began to lift, replaced by a quiet curiosity and a renewed zest for living. One morning, as sunlight spilled into her kitchen, Helen decided to revisit a passion she had long shelved: gardening. Years ago, she had tended a small backyard garden, growing tomatoes, herbs, and flowers. It was a connection to nature that always soothed her spirit. Now, with the freshness of her new chapter, she felt drawn to the earth again. She dug up old pots, bought rich soil and seed packets, and planted a mix of herbs, basil, rosemary, thyme, and vegetables like kale and cherry tomatoes. Tending the garden became a daily ritual, a time for reflection and grounding. As the plants grew, so did Helen's sense of accomplishment and joy. The garden was more than just a hobby, it was a symbol of growth and resilience. Meanwhile, Helen continued to explore new recipes that aligned with her dietary guidelines. She delighted in experimenting with wild-caught fish dishes, incorporating spices known for their anti-inflammatory properties, and creating vibrant salads that burst with color and flavor. Each meal felt like a celebration of life and health. Helen also began to explore meditation and gentle yoga, practices recommended by her doctor to reduce stress and improve heart health. The slow stretches and mindful breathing helped calm her mind and strengthen her body. One afternoon, while practicing yoga on her patio, Helen felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. The journey had been hard, but it had opened doors to new experiences and self-discovery. Her relationships deepened as well. Katie and Sam often joined her for garden lunches or cooking sessions, the warmth between them growing steadily. Helen found herself opening up more, sharing not only her struggles but her hopes and dreams. This openness created a bridge that healed old wounds and built new memories. Inspired by her progress, Helen decided to start a small blog, sharing her journey and the recipes she'd learned. She wanted to connect with others navigating the challenges of aging and health. To her surprise, the blog quickly gained followers, many women over 60 who found comfort and motivation in Helen's honest, heartfelt writing. Comments poured in, stories of their own battles, questions about food choices, and messages of thanks. Helen responded to each, fostering a supportive online community. One day, a message arrived from a woman named Lisa, who shared how Helen's story had inspired her to make changes after decades of unhealthy habits. "I'm 65, Lisa wrote, and I feel like it's never too late. Thank you for showing me the way." Helen's heart swelled. She realized her journey had grown beyond herself, it was touching lives, sparking hope. The blog also brought unexpected opportunities. A local community center invited Helen to lead a workshop on anti-inflammatory cooking for seniors. Preparing for the class, Helen poured her heart into crafting recipes and tips that were accessible, affordable, and delicious. The workshop was a success, with attendees eager to learn and share their own experiences. Helen felt a profound sense of purpose. Through all the challenges, the setbacks, and the triumphs, she had rediscovered joy, not just in food or health, but in connection, growth, and giving back. That evening, as she sat in her garden, the sun dipping below the horizon, Helen reflected on how far she'd come. She wrote in her journal, "Joy is not a destination but a journey, a series of moments chosen with intention." With a peaceful smile, she closed her notebook and looked forward to the unfolding path ahead. Helen's journey was no longer just a personal endeavor, it had blossomed into something greater. The blog, the workshops, and the community center gatherings had created a ripple effect she hadn't anticipated. She found herself increasingly drawn to the power of community, where shared experiences and collective support transformed individual struggles into a tapestry of resilience. One chilly autumn morning, Helen arrived early at the community center, carrying a basket of homemade bone broth and wild salmon patties. The room was already filling with familiar faces, neighbors, new friends, and some she had only known online until now. As the group settled in, Helen welcomed them with a warm smile and opened the session by sharing her latest discoveries about the 4 meats to avoid and the 4 to embrace after 60. The conversation flowed naturally, with people exchanging stories about their health challenges, favorite recipes, and small victories. Helen listened, realizing how vital this space was, not just for learning but for belonging. One woman, Marcia, shared how switching from conventional pork to pasture-raised chicken had eased her chronic joint pain. Another, James, spoke about the mental clarity he'd gained after incorporating more wild-caught fish into his diet. The testimonials filled Helen with hope and purpose. Later, as they tasted the salmon patties, Helen noticed how food could be a bridge, uniting people through flavors, memories, and shared goals. She encouraged everyone to bring their own recipes next time, promising a potluck that would celebrate their diverse culinary journeys. Outside the center, the crisp air carried the scent of fallen leaves and promise. Helen walked home with Katie, their steps light despite the chill. "You're building something beautiful here, Mom," Katie said. "It's more than just food, it's healing." Helen nodded. "I never imagined how important connection would be. It's the missing ingredient." Inspired, Helen began to organize monthly events, cooking classes, nutrition talks, and walking groups. Each gathering brought new faces and stories, weaving a community bound by compassion and empowerment. She also started collaborating with local farmers and fishmongers, arranging discounts and workshops to make healthy food more accessible. The practical challenges of affordability and availability were real, especially for many seniors on fixed incomes. Helen's advocacy grew louder, fueled by a deep desire to remove barriers and create opportunities. Social media became another tool for connection. Helen's blog followers expanded into a vibrant online forum where members shared tips, recipes, and encouragement. The sense of camaraderie was palpable even through screens, reminding Helen that distance could not diminish the power of shared purpose. As winter approached, Helen's own health continued to improve. The scare of her heart attack felt like a distant memory, replaced by a steady rhythm of mindful eating, exercise, and self-care. But more importantly, she felt anchored by the community she had helped nurture. One evening, as snowflakes drifted gently outside her window, Helen received a call from her doctor. The latest blood work showed remarkable improvements, not just in her cholesterol and inflammation levels but in markers associated with cognitive health. "Helen," her doctor said, "you're a testament to how lifestyle changes can profoundly impact aging. Keep up the great work." The praise felt like a blessing, but Helen knew the journey wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence. She thought back to the early days of doubt and struggle, grateful for the resilience that had carried her forward. With the support of her family and community, Helen felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. That night, as she sipped tea by the fire, she penned a final thought in her journal: "Together, we are stronger. Community is the heart that nourishes the soul." The road ahead was uncertain, but Helen knew she wouldn't walk it alone. With hope as her compass and love as her guide, she stepped confidently into the future. Just when Helen thought her journey was steady and sure, the past came knocking again, reminding her that transformation was rarely a straight line. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, she stumbled upon a dusty box filled with old photographs and letters from years gone by. Among them was a letter from her late husband, Richard, written during a difficult time in their marriage. The words stirred a whirlwind of emotions: regret, sorrow, and unresolved pain. Helen sank into a chair, heart heavy with memories she thought she had buried. Richard had been her first love, but their relationship was fraught with misunderstandings and silence. His sudden death years earlier had left a void that sometimes felt impossible to fill. Now, faced with this tangible reminder, Helen grappled with guilt over things left unsaid and wounds never healed. That night, sleep eluded her. She wrestled with the question: could she find peace with her past and still move forward? The next morning, Helen reached out to her therapist, a compassionate woman named Laura who had helped her navigate the emotional terrain of aging and loss. In their session, Helen shared the flood of feelings stirred by the letter and her fears that old pain might derail her progress. Laura listened patiently, then gently suggested that healing meant embracing the whole story, the joys and the sorrows. She encouraged Helen to write a letter to Richard, expressing all she felt, whether anger, love, or forgiveness. Helen took the advice to heart. Over the next few days, she poured her thoughts onto paper, unearthing emotions she had long avoided. The act was both cathartic and terrifying. She wrote about their early years, the dreams they shared, the misunderstandings that drove them apart, and her enduring love that had never truly faded. When she finished, Helen felt lighter, as if releasing the weight of the past. She read the letter aloud to herself, tears mixing with relief. This exercise didn't erase the pain but transformed it into a source of strength and acceptance. With renewed clarity, Helen recognized that her journey wasn't just about physical health but emotional resilience as well. She realized that true healing required integrating every part of her story, the chapters of joy and the chapters of heartbreak. The experience deepened her empathy for others facing their own shadows, enriching the compassion she shared in her community work and writing. Helen decided to share this part of her journey on her blog, hoping to encourage others to confront their past with courage and kindness. The response was immediate and profound. Readers thanked her for the honesty, many revealing their own struggles with loss and forgiveness. Some wrote about parents, partners, or themselves, yearning for peace but unsure how to find it. Helen's vulnerability became a beacon, reminding everyone that healing was a process of both body and soul. In the weeks that followed, Helen felt a subtle but powerful shift within. The old demons no longer held sway over her spirit. Instead, they became teachers, reminders of the depth and complexity of a life well lived. As spring breathed new life into the world outside, Helen embraced the season of renewal within. She returned to her garden, planting new seeds with the knowledge that growth often required weathering storms. She continued her work with the community, her message now infused with a deeper understanding of the interplay between emotional and physical health. One evening, sitting by the window as the sun set in hues of gold and rose, Helen reflected on her journey. She wrote in her journal, "Healing is not forgetting, but embracing the whole of our story, with love." And with that, she closed the book on old wounds and stepped forward into the light of a new day. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? After months of steady progress and emotional healing, Helen felt a subtle but unmistakable shift in her health and outlook. The daily routines of nourishing meals, mindful movement, and heartfelt connection had woven together into a new rhythm that felt natural and sustaining. Yet, it was a breakthrough moment, unexpected and profound, that truly crystallized her transformation. One Saturday morning, Helen attended a health seminar at the community center featuring a renowned nutritionist who specialized in aging and inflammation. The room buzzed with anticipation as the expert began to explain how certain foods could either ignite chronic inflammation or soothe it, profoundly impacting longevity and quality of life. Helen listened intently, recognizing many of the recommendations she had already embraced: the importance of wild-caught fish rich in omega-3s, pasture-raised chicken, bone broth, and nutrient-dense vegetables. The nutritionist emphasized avoiding processed meats, high-fat red meats, and inflammatory additives. As the seminar continued, Helen felt a sense of validation and empowerment wash over her. This wasn't just her personal experiment, it was grounded in cutting-edge science. The expert's presentation reinforced the message she had been sharing with her community, giving her renewed confidence to push forward. After the talk, Helen approached the nutritionist, asking specific questions about meal planning and supplementation tailored to women over 60. The expert offered practical tips and encouraged Helen to keep sharing her story, noting that real-life examples like hers could inspire meaningful change far beyond the medical community. Returning home that day, Helen felt energized. She dove into her recipe collection, fine-tuning dishes to maximize anti-inflammatory benefits while keeping flavors vibrant and satisfying. She started incorporating more turmeric into her cooking, adding fresh ginger to teas, and experimenting with fermented foods to support gut health. The kitchen became a laboratory of wellness, a place where science met art in every carefully prepared meal. Beyond the physical changes, Helen noticed a new mental clarity and emotional stability emerging. She reflected on how intertwined body and mind truly were. The heart attack that once felt like an ending was now clearly a pivot point, an invitation to reimagine what health and happiness meant at this stage of life. Motivated by this breakthrough, Helen ramped up her community efforts. She organized a series of inflammation busters workshops, focusing on simple, accessible ways to identify and reduce inflammatory triggers through diet and lifestyle. The sessions were interactive and warm, with participants sharing recipes, challenges, and successes. Helen watched as people's faces lit up with hope, just as hers had. Katie often joined her, filming the sessions and helping manage the growing online following. The mother-daughter partnership became a source of joy and strength for both. One afternoon, Helen received an invitation to speak at a regional conference on aging and nutrition. The opportunity felt daunting but exhilarating. She prepared meticulously, crafting a talk that combined personal narrative with scientific insights and practical advice. Standing before a large audience of health professionals and seniors, Helen shared her journey candidly: the mistakes, the setbacks, the breakthroughs. The response was overwhelming. Attendees approached her afterward with gratitude and curiosity, eager to implement the lessons in their own lives and communities. That night, as she lay in bed, Helen marveled at how far she had come. The breakthrough was not just a moment in time, but a ripple that continued to expand, touching hearts and changing lives. She wrote in her journal, "Health is a journey of discovery, one meal, one choice at a time. When knowledge meets action, transformation becomes possible." With a peaceful heart and steady spirit, Helen prepared to embrace whatever came next, confident that the best chapters were still ahead. With the momentum of her breakthrough and growing community presence, Helen felt an exhilarating sense of purpose. Yet, as her voice grew louder, so too did the doubts and critics that inevitably come with change. Not everyone welcomed her message or lifestyle transformation. One afternoon, after posting a detailed article about the dangers of processed and high-fat red meats for seniors, Helen received a sharply worded email from a longtime family friend, Mark, who challenged her views. Mark was a passionate advocate of traditional diets and argued that moderation was the key, not elimination. He questioned the science behind Helen's claims and expressed concern that such strict guidelines could alienate people or cause nutritional deficiencies. The email shook Helen more than she expected. Mark's skepticism felt like a personal rebuke. She reread his words, feeling a swirl of frustration, sadness, and doubt. Was she being too rigid? Had she overlooked nuances? That night, Helen lay awake wrestling with her conscience. She knew her story and evidence were strong, but doubts gnawed at her confidence. Could she hold space for different perspectives while staying true to her convictions? The next day, Helen sought advice from Laura, her therapist, who reminded her that every advocate faces resistance. It is a sign that change is underway. Laura encouraged Helen to listen openly but not let criticism derail her mission. Inspired by this, Helen crafted a thoughtful response to Mark's email. She acknowledged the importance of balance and invited him to explore the latest research together. She emphasized that her journey was about informed choices tailored to individual needs, not dogma. To her surprise, Mark replied with openness and curiosity, thanking her for the respectful dialogue. This exchange deepened Helen's understanding of the complexity of nutrition and the value of compassionate conversation. She realized that fostering community meant embracing diverse voices and experiences, even when they challenged her own. At the same time, Helen encountered skepticism within her local community. Some seniors were wary of changing lifelong eating habits, wary of cost or complexity, or simply resistant to new ideas. Helen met this with patience and empathy, hosting informal meetups to discuss concerns and share simple, affordable recipes. She learned to celebrate small steps and personal victories, knowing that transformation was a process, not a leap. Meanwhile, Helen's own doubts surfaced during moments of exhaustion or frustration. On particularly difficult days, she questioned whether her efforts truly made a difference. But each time, a message from a blog reader, a smile from a workshop participant, or a loving word from Katie reignited her spirit. Helen also expanded her reading, diving into scientific journals and memoirs of others who had faced similar challenges. This deepened her knowledge and connected her to a wider network of support. One memorable afternoon, Helen attended a panel discussion featuring nutritionists, doctors, and senior advocates. The conversation was lively and diverse, highlighting the evolving nature of health science and the importance of individualized care. Helen felt affirmed that her approach, grounded in science, tempered with compassion, was part of a growing movement toward holistic aging. Reflecting on these experiences, Helen realized that doubt and criticism were not obstacles but opportunities for growth. They sharpened her message, expanded her empathy, and strengthened her resolve. She wrote in her journal, "True progress requires courage to face opposition and wisdom to listen without losing oneself." As the seasons changed, Helen embraced the balance of conviction and openness, determined to continue her journey with heart and humility. The path was not always smooth, but it was hers to walk, one thoughtful step at a time. With each passing season, Helen found herself weaving new traditions into the fabric of her life, traditions that honored her past but also embraced the present and the future. After years of routines shaped by family expectations and old habits, she was discovering the freedom and joy of creating rituals that reflected her evolving values and aspirations. One such tradition began quietly, on a Sunday morning. Helen invited Katie and Sam over for a healing brunch, a meal crafted from recipes she had developed focused on nourishing the body and soul. The table was set with colorful bowls of wild-caught salmon salad, fresh greens drizzled with homemade vinaigrette, and warm slices of whole-grain bread. The air was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed herbal tea and lemon zest. As they ate, conversation flowed easily, stories of the week, hopes for the future, and reflections on their shared journey. This simple gathering became a cherished weekly ritual, a time for connection and renewal. Beyond the kitchen, Helen began exploring cultural traditions that emphasized wellness and longevity. She read about Mediterranean and Okinawan diets, admired their balance of fresh, seasonal foods, and the importance placed on community and movement. Inspired, Helen introduced elements of these lifestyles into her own routine, joining a local walking group that met by the lake, practicing mindful eating, and incorporating spices like oregano, garlic, and seaweed into her cooking. These new traditions weren't about strict adherence but about embracing what felt joyful and meaningful. Holidays brought opportunities for blending old and new customs. During Thanksgiving, Helen prepared a feast that combined classic favorites with healthier alternatives: roasted turkey breast instead of dark meat, a vibrant cranberry orange relish, and mashed cauliflower in place of heavy potatoes. Family members noticed the flavors and asked for recipes, sparking lively discussions about food and health. Helen felt a sense of pride and accomplishment, knowing she was passing down not just recipes but values that could benefit generations. At the same time, Helen nurtured a daily gratitude practice, a tradition she adapted from meditation teachings. Each morning, before breakfast, she took a moment to reflect on 3 things she was thankful for. This small ritual grounded her in the present and cultivated optimism, even on challenging days. The practice deepened her emotional resilience and enhanced her appreciation for the simple pleasures of life: a blooming flower, a kind word, a moment of silence. Helen's commitment to new traditions extended to self-care as well. She set aside weekly me time for activities that replenished her spirit: reading novels, soaking in a warm bath with eucalyptus oils, or practicing gentle stretches in the garden. These moments were acts of love and respect for herself, essential components of her holistic health journey. The transformation in Helen's life did not go unnoticed. Friends and family remarked on her vibrant energy and peaceful demeanor. Helen's story inspired others to explore their own paths of wellness and meaning. One afternoon, during a community event, an elderly woman approached Helen and shared how hearing about her journey encouraged her to try gardening and cooking anew. Helen smiled, realizing that traditions, whether old or new, were powerful vessels for connection and healing. She understood that the legacy she was building was not just about health but about joy, intention, and presence. As spring blossomed, Helen walked through her garden, now lush and vibrant, feeling deeply rooted in the life she had created. She wrote in her journal, "Traditions evolve, as do we. Embracing change with gratitude and grace is the greatest gift we can give ourselves." The path ahead remained open and full of promise, and Helen was ready to walk it, one tradition, one moment at a time. Helen's journey took an unexpected turn one crisp spring afternoon when she met Dr. Samuel Bennett, a retired cardiologist with a passion for holistic health. The encounter was serendipitous, sparked by a chance conversation at the community center's weekly farmers market. Helen was admiring a basket of fresh wild salmon when an elderly gentleman approached, his eyes bright with curiosity. "You seem to know your fish," he said with a warm smile. Helen laughed and explained her mission to educate seniors about healthy meats and lifestyle choices. Dr. Bennett nodded approvingly, sharing his own experiences treating heart patients and advocating for nutrition-based interventions. Their conversation flowed easily, bridging decades of medical practice and personal healing. Intrigued by Helen's story and dedication, Dr. Bennett offered to mentor her, providing insights from his extensive knowledge and encouraging a scientific approach to complement her personal experiences. Over the following weeks, they met regularly at the community center library, poring over research articles, discussing emerging studies, and brainstorming ways to amplify Helen's message. Dr. Bennett's guidance helped Helen deepen her understanding of cardiovascular health, inflammation, and metabolic processes, empowering her to communicate complex concepts in accessible ways for her audience. This mentorship was more than intellectual, it was a source of emotional support and validation. Dr. Bennett admired Helen's resilience and authenticity, reminding her that true healing combined evidence and empathy. Under his tutelage, Helen refined her workshops, incorporating up-to-date data alongside stories of transformation. She felt invigorated by this partnership, sensing that her work was gaining new credibility and reach. Together, they planned a community health fair, aiming to bring seniors, healthcare providers, and nutrition experts together. The event featured cooking demonstrations, blood pressure screenings, and interactive talks, with Helen and Dr. Bennett at the forefront. The fair was a resounding success, drawing hundreds of attendees and sparking ongoing collaborations among local organizations. Helen noticed how Dr. Bennett's presence bridged gaps between traditional medicine and holistic approaches, fostering trust and openness. Beyond their professional connection, Helen and Dr. Bennett developed a genuine friendship. They shared stories of loss and renewal, laughter and challenges, becoming companions on parallel paths of aging with purpose. One afternoon, as they walked through a nearby park, Dr. Bennett confided in Helen about his own struggles adjusting to retirement and finding meaning beyond his medical career. Helen listened with empathy, realizing how mentorship was a two-way street, offering growth and support for both. Inspired by this bond, Helen invited Dr. Bennett to contribute guest posts on her blog, enriching the content with expert perspectives. His articles on heart health, inflammation, and stress management were well received, broadening the audience and sparking meaningful conversations. Helen felt her mission evolving from a solitary journey to a collective movement, fueled by knowledge, compassion, and connection. The unexpected mentorship became a cornerstone of her continued growth, reminding her that guidance could come from the most surprising places when hearts and minds are open. She reflected in her journal, "Wisdom is a gift shared, not hoarded. Together, we rise higher." As summer blossomed, Helen and Dr. Bennett planned their next project, a cookbook featuring recipes that married flavor, tradition, and science, aimed at empowering seniors to take control of their health through food. The collaboration symbolized the merging of experience and expertise, a testament to the power of community and mentorship on the path to wellness. The cookbook project with Dr. Bennett brought a fresh surge of energy into Helen's life. What began as a simple idea blossomed into a labor of love, combining her personal experience with his medical expertise to create a guide that was both accessible and inspiring. Helen spent hours in her kitchen, testing recipes, tweaking ingredients, and capturing the flavors that honored health and tradition. Each dish was carefully crafted to balance anti-inflammatory benefits with familiar tastes, making the transition to healthier eating feel natural and enjoyable for seniors. Katie eagerly joined the effort, photographing the vibrant meals and helping design the layout for easy reading. The family collaboration infused the project with warmth and creativity, reflecting the spirit of community Helen had worked so hard to build. One of Helen's favorite recipes was a wild-caught salmon with turmeric and ginger glaze, rich in omega-3s and spices known to reduce inflammation. She remembered the first time she prepared it for her Sunday brunch, watching her family savor each bite with delight. The joy in their eyes fueled her commitment to making wholesome food approachable. As the pages of the cookbook filled, Helen and Dr. Bennett included tips on ingredient sourcing, meal planning, and simple substitutions for common allergens or preferences. They also shared stories, Helen's journey from heart attack to healing, and Dr. Bennett's insights into cardiovascular health, reminding readers that food was not just fuel but medicine and love. The community's response to the early previews was overwhelmingly positive. Seniors who had attended Helen's workshops expressed excitement about trying the recipes, and local health practitioners offered to distribute the cookbook in their clinics. Helen felt a profound sense of purpose knowing that their work could reach people beyond her immediate circle, touching lives in quiet, meaningful ways. During this process, Helen encountered unexpected challenges. Some recipes required special ingredients not readily available in all neighborhoods, prompting her to research affordable alternatives. Others had to be adapted for people with limited mobility or cooking experience. Helen and Dr. Bennett approached these hurdles with creativity and patience, reminding themselves that accessibility was key to impact. The cookbook also sparked deeper conversations about food justice and the barriers many seniors face in accessing fresh, healthy options. Helen began advocating for community gardens, farmers markets, and nutrition assistance programs, expanding her mission from individual health to systemic change. One afternoon, Helen hosted a launch event for the cookbook at the community center, inviting neighbors, friends, and health professionals. The room buzzed with excitement as attendees sampled dishes, shared stories, and exchanged tips. Helen's heart swelled as she listened to conversations about newfound hope and determination. The event was more than a celebration, it was a testament to the power of food to unite, heal, and inspire. Reflecting on the journey, Helen realized that cooking was a metaphor for her transformation. Like a recipe, life required the right balance of ingredients, love, knowledge, resilience, and community, to create something nourishing and beautiful. She wrote in her journal, "Change begins in the kitchen, in the heart, in the choices we make daily." Each meal is a chance to heal, to connect, to grow. The cookbook's success opened new doors for Helen. She was invited to speak at conferences, collaborate with nutritionists, and even appeared on a local radio show to share her story. Yet, through it all, she remained grounded, focused on the simple truth that meaningful change was built one bite, one conversation, one moment at a time. As summer stretched into autumn, Helen looked forward to continuing her work, confident that the seed she had planted would flourish, nourishing bodies and spirits alike for years to come. Despite the momentum Helen had built, life reminded her that the path to wellness was rarely a straight line. One chilly autumn morning, Helen woke with a persistent ache in her chest. At first, she dismissed it as fatigue or muscle strain, but the discomfort grew sharper by midday. Concerned, she called Katie, who insisted they visit the emergency room immediately. The diagnosis was sobering: a mild arrhythmia, a disruption in the heart's rhythm that required careful management. This setback jolted Helen. After all the progress she had made, the unexpected news threatened to shake her confidence and stir old fears. But Helen was determined not to let this challenge define her. Drawing on the resilience she had cultivated, she embraced the setback as part of her ongoing journey. Her cardiologist explained that while arrhythmias were common in people over 60, lifestyle adjustments could help control symptoms and reduce risks. Helen recommitted to her nutrition plan, stress management techniques, and gentle exercise, now with renewed urgency. She also leaned heavily on her support network: Katie, Dr. Bennett, Laura, and her community. Their encouragement reminded her she was not alone. The arrhythmia forced Helen to slow down and listen more closely to her body. She incorporated daily breathing exercises and meditation to soothe anxiety, prioritized sleep, and adjusted her schedule to avoid overexertion. These changes were humbling but ultimately empowering. Helen found peace in acceptance and trust in her body's wisdom. Emotionally, the setback brought waves of frustration and vulnerability. Helen journaled openly about her fears, the temptation to retreat, and the courage required to face uncertainty. Writing became a therapeutic tool, helping her process complex feelings and reaffirm her commitment to growth. The community she had nurtured also rallied around her. Workshop attendees shared their own stories of setbacks, creating a collective space of empathy and hope. Helen realized that vulnerability was not a weakness but a bridge connecting human experiences. Professionally, Helen's setback deepened her advocacy for holistic health. She emphasized that healing was a dynamic process, marked by ups and downs, and that resilience meant adapting and persevering. Her message became richer, more authentic, resonating deeply with those navigating their own health challenges. One afternoon, Dr. Bennett visited Helen at home, bringing a collection of recent research articles and a homemade bone broth recipe. Their conversation was a balm, filled with practical advice and heartfelt support. Together, they planned adjustments to Helen's wellness routine that balanced medical guidance with holistic practices. Slowly but surely, Helen's condition stabilized. She learned to recognize early warning signs and respond calmly, reinforcing her sense of agency. The setback, while daunting, ultimately strengthened her resolve and deepened her empathy. Helen's journey taught her that setbacks were not failures but opportunities to grow stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. As winter approached, Helen reflected on the season's lessons. She wrote, "Strength is not the absence of struggle but the grace to move through it." Every challenge is a chapter in the story of resilience. With renewed faith in herself and the support around her, Helen prepared to face the coming months with courage and hope, knowing that the journey of healing was lifelong, ever unfolding, and deeply human. In the wake of her health setback, Helen felt an even stronger urge to connect, not just with individuals, but with institutions and communities that could amplify her mission. She realized that personal transformation was powerful, but systemic change required collaboration, dialogue, and bridge building. Helen reached out to local healthcare providers, senior centers, nutritionists, and community organizers, seeking partnerships to spread her message about healthy eating and lifestyle choices for those over 60. One of her first contacts was the director of a nearby senior center, Ms. Ramirez, who was enthusiastic about hosting regular workshops and cooking classes. Helen's proposal was met with open arms. Together, they developed a monthly program titled Healthy Aging, Delicious Living, combining educational talks with hands-on meal preparation. The sessions attracted a diverse group of seniors, many of whom had been skeptical at first but gradually warmed to the friendly, supportive environment. Helen found joy in facilitating these gatherings, witnessing firsthand how shared experiences fostered trust and motivation. Beyond the local level, Helen connected with nonprofit organizations focused on food security and senior health. She joined advisory boards, contributed to newsletters, and participated in panel discussions, lending her voice and story to broader conversations. Helen's advocacy expanded to include addressing barriers such as food deserts, transportation issues, and cultural preferences that affected dietary choices among seniors. These efforts required patience and humility. Helen learned to listen deeply to community needs and adapt her programs accordingly. She realized that building bridges meant embracing diversity and complexity rather than imposing rigid solutions. A pivotal moment came when Helen was invited to speak at a regional health conference. Standing before an audience of healthcare professionals, policymakers, and fellow advocates, she shared her journey, from her heart attack to her transformation and ongoing challenges. She spoke passionately about the importance of integrating nutrition education into senior care, the power of community support, and the role of compassion in health promotion. Her words resonated deeply, sparking meaningful dialogue and new collaborations. Back home, Helen's relationships with local doctors and dietitians grew stronger. She invited them to participate in her workshops and co-hosted events that bridged medical advice with practical lifestyle changes. These partnerships enhanced the credibility and reach of her work, making it more impactful. On a personal level, Helen felt a renewed sense of purpose. The setback she had faced seemed less daunting when viewed through the lens of collective action. She embraced the role of connector, someone who could bring people together around shared goals of health and dignity in aging. This chapter of her journey also taught Helen the importance of patience. Change on a systemic level was slow and often met with resistance. But small victories, like a senior deciding to try a new recipe or a clinic incorporating nutrition counseling, felt monumental. Helen often reminded herself and others that meaningful progress was made one step at a time. In her journal, she wrote, "Bridges don't form overnight. They require vision, effort, and the willingness to meet others halfway. Together, we can cross divides and create healthier futures." As winter gave way to spring, Helen looked forward to expanding her initiatives. She dreamed of creating a network of support that connected seniors, healthcare providers, policymakers, and communities across regions. She believed that by building bridges, she could help transform not just individual lives but the culture of aging itself, toward one of empowerment, respect, and joy. Helen came to realize that while facts and figures were vital, the heartbeat of her mission lay in storytelling, the sharing of lived experiences that could touch hearts and inspire change. Her own journey, once a private struggle, had become a beacon for others navigating the complexities of health after 60. At one of her community workshops, Helen invited participants to share their stories, of challenges, hopes, setbacks, and victories. The room, initially hesitant and quiet, soon blossomed with voices revealing raw vulnerability and courage. As individuals recounted moments of fear, loss, resilience, and discovery, Helen saw the transformative power of connection. These stories built bridges of empathy and understanding, dissolving isolation and fostering a collective spirit. Inspired, Helen launched a digital storytelling project, inviting seniors from across the country to submit their narratives via video, audio, or written word. She envisioned a tapestry of voices that could educate, encourage, and empower others. The response was overwhelming. Stories poured in, tales of reinvention, of overcoming chronic illness, of finding joy in new passions. Helen curated and shared these stories on her website and social media, highlighting the diversity and strength of the aging community. Each story carried a lesson, a spark of hope that rippled through the network. Helen also began training others in the art of storytelling, helping seniors craft and share their experiences with confidence. Workshops focused on writing, speaking, and digital literacy, equipping participants to become advocates and role models in their own circles. Through storytelling, Helen witnessed the breaking down of stereotypes about aging, replacing fear with respect and admiration. Healthcare professionals attending her sessions reported a shift in their perceptions, noting how personal narratives deepened their empathy and understanding. The power of storytelling extended beyond education; it was a tool for healing. Sharing one's story allowed for acknowledgement and validation of pain and triumph, fostering emotional well-being. Helen herself found healing in this process, as she revisited her journey and celebrated the growth born from adversity. At a national conference, Helen presented a keynote address on the role of storytelling in health promotion. She urged organizations to listen to and elevate the voices of those they served, emphasizing that authentic stories could drive meaningful policy and practice changes. Her speech was met with standing ovations and invitations to collaborate with prominent health agencies. Helen's storytelling initiative also caught the attention of media outlets, leading to interviews and features that expanded her reach. Yet, despite growing recognition, Helen remained grounded in the personal connections that fueled her work. She continued to attend local workshops, meet participants face-to-face, and celebrate each story shared as a victory. Reflecting on this phase of her journey, Helen wrote, "Stories are bridges between hearts. They teach us that we are not alone and that every voice matters. In telling our truths, we find strength in community." As the project flourished, Helen dreamed of creating an anthology of senior stories, an enduring legacy that would inspire generations to come. She believed that through storytelling, aging could be reframed as a chapter of possibility, wisdom, and grace. After months of focusing on her health, community, and advocacy, Helen found herself unexpectedly confronted by a different kind of challenge, one of the heart. It came quietly at first, in the form of a phone call from Michael, her college sweetheart, who had recently moved back to town after decades away. Michael's voice carried the same warmth and kindness Helen remembered, stirring a mix of nostalgia and curiosity. They agreed to meet at a small cafe near the park where they had spent countless afternoons during their youth. Sitting across from each other, the years melted away as they caught up on life's twists and turns. Michael shared stories of his career as a writer and the adventures that had taken him across the country, while Helen spoke about her health journey, community work, and the unexpected mentorship with Dr. Bennett. The conversation flowed effortlessly, punctuated by laughter and moments of reflection. Helen was surprised by how comfortable and natural their connection felt, as if time had folded back on itself. Over the following weeks, they began meeting regularly, rediscovering the friendship that had been a foundation in their early years. For Helen, this renewed relationship was a source of joy and grounding amid the complexities of her health and activism. Michael listened with genuine interest to her stories and offered unwavering support, becoming an anchor in moments of uncertainty. Their bond deepened, marked by shared values, mutual respect, and a rekindling of affection. Helen found herself opening up about fears and hopes she hadn't voiced in years, feeling seen and cherished. Michael, too, embraced this new chapter with vulnerability and openness, grateful for the chance to reconnect. Navigating a relationship later in life presented its own challenges, balancing independence with companionship, addressing past wounds, and managing health concerns. Yet Helen and Michael approached these challenges with honesty and patience, committed to building a partnership grounded in trust and kindness. Their time together brought Helen a renewed sense of vitality, reminding her that love could be a powerful healer. She noticed how Michael's presence lifted her spirits, easing the weight of stress and enriching everyday moments with laughter and warmth. The couple began exploring new activities, taking gentle hikes, attending community events, and cooking meals from Helen's cookbook together. These shared experiences deepened their connection and brought new meaning to Helen's journey. Helen confided in Dr. Bennett about this unexpected blessing, and he smiled, affirming that emotional well-being was a vital component of overall health. He encouraged Helen to nurture this relationship alongside her other priorities, emphasizing balance and self-care. As their relationship blossomed, Helen reflected on the lessons she had learned about love and resilience. She realized that opening one's heart required courage, especially after loss and hardship, but also offered profound reward. Helen wrote in her journal, "Love is not bound by age or circumstance. It is a force that renews, heals, and inspires. Embracing it fully is part of living with courage and grace." Michael and Helen's story became another testament to the possibility of new beginnings at any stage of life. Their journey was not without obstacles, but their commitment to kindness, communication, and mutual support provided a strong foundation. Together, they embraced the joys and uncertainties ahead, confident that love could light the way through all seasons. As Helen's work and personal life flourished, she encountered a new frontier that initially felt intimidating: technology. While she had embraced change in so many ways, the digital world was something she had long viewed as complex and overwhelming. However, with the rise of virtual workshops, online storytelling projects, and social media advocacy, Helen realized that mastering technology was essential to expanding her impact and staying connected in an increasingly digital age. Her first step was to enroll in a local community college class designed specifically for seniors wanting to improve their digital literacy. Helen was nervous but determined. The classroom was filled with people eager but hesitant, many sharing the same apprehensions about technology as she had. The instructor, a patient and encouraging young woman named Maya, created an atmosphere of support and curiosity. Helen's initial lessons focused on basics like email, video calls, and social media platforms. She was surprised to find herself enjoying the process of learning and the small victories of sending a message or posting a photo. Her confidence grew steadily. One breakthrough came when Helen learned how to create and manage her own website. With Maya's guidance, she developed a platform to host her cookbook, share community stories, and provide resources for seniors focused on health and wellness. The website quickly became a hub of activity, drawing visitors from around the country and sparking connections Helen had never imagined. Social media, initially daunting, soon became a powerful tool in Helen's hands. She used platforms like Facebook and Instagram to share recipes, personal reflections, and testimonials from those inspired by her work. The immediacy and reach of digital storytelling allowed her to engage a broader audience and receive real-time feedback and support. Helen also discovered the power of virtual communities. She joined online forums where seniors exchanged advice, encouragement, and shared experiences. These connections transcended geography and offered a rich source of inspiration and friendship. Helen began hosting live virtual cooking demos and wellness talks, attracting attendees who appreciated the accessibility and warmth she brought to the digital space. The shift to technology also required Helen to navigate challenges, technical glitches, privacy concerns, and the temptation of digital overwhelm. She learned to set boundaries, schedule breaks, and seek help when needed. These practices reinforced her commitment to balance and self-care. Her family, especially Katie, became invaluable tech coaches and cheerleaders. Katie helped Helen with more advanced skills like video editing and online marketing, turning learning into a shared adventure. Helen cherished these moments of connection, grateful for the blend of generations working together. Embracing technology expanded Helen's capacity to advocate for healthy aging in innovative ways. She collaborated with medical professionals to create webinars on heart health, participated in podcasts about nutrition, and even contributed to virtual conferences. These platforms amplified her voice and allowed her to influence policies and practices beyond her local community. Reflecting on her digital journey, Helen wrote, "Technology is not a barrier but a bridge, connecting us to knowledge, community, and opportunity. Learning is lifelong, and every new skill is a step toward empowerment." Helen's embrace of technology was a testament to her adaptability and open heart. It symbolized the ongoing evolution of her mission to inspire, educate, and uplift, proving that age was no barrier to innovation or impact. Helen never expected that mentorship would come into her life at this stage, yet it arrived when she needed it most. Though she had evolved into a confident advocate, there remained moments of doubt and uncertainty. Balancing her growing responsibilities, health concerns, and personal life sometimes felt overwhelming. One afternoon, while attending a regional health symposium, Helen met Dr. Marcus Lang, a distinguished geriatrician known for his innovative approaches to senior care. Their conversation began casually, discussing the latest research and community programs, but soon deepened into a meaningful exchange about challenges and aspirations. Dr. Lang, impressed by Helen's knowledge and passion, offered to mentor her. At first, Helen hesitated, wondering what she could gain from someone so accomplished. But she soon realized that mentorship was a two-way street, a dynamic relationship that nurtured growth for both. Under Dr. Lang's guidance, Helen gained new insights into the complexities of aging, the importance of evidence-based interventions, and strategies for influencing health policy. His mentorship also helped Helen navigate the administrative and organizational aspects of her expanding initiatives. Beyond professional advice, Dr. Lang became a trusted confidant, someone who listened without judgment and encouraged Helen to honor her boundaries and prioritize self-care. Their meetings, sometimes over coffee, other times via video calls, were a space for honest reflection and renewed motivation. Dr. Lang challenged Helen to think bigger, encouraging her to propose pilot programs and seek funding for community health projects. Together, they drafted grant proposals and outlined research collaborations that could enhance resources for seniors in underserved areas. Helen's confidence soared as doors previously closed began to open. This mentorship deepened her understanding of the systemic nature of healthcare challenges and the power of interdisciplinary collaboration. It also reminded her that asking for help was a strength, not a weakness. Helen shared this lesson with her community, inspiring others to seek mentorship and build supportive networks. One project born from their partnership was a series of workshops combining medical education with practical lifestyle strategies, tailored specifically for seniors with chronic conditions. These workshops blended Helen's experiential wisdom with Dr. Lang's clinical expertise, creating a comprehensive and accessible resource. Feedback from participants was overwhelmingly positive, reinforcing the value of their collaboration. Helen reflected on the unexpected ways mentorship enriched her journey. She realized that no matter how much experience one accumulates, there is always room to learn, grow, and be supported. This humility became a cornerstone of her philosophy, shaping how she approached leadership and community engagement. In her journal, Helen wrote, "Mentorship is a gift, an exchange of wisdom, encouragement, and trust. It reminds us that we are part of a larger story, connected by a shared purpose." As Helen prepared to launch new initiatives inspired by this partnership, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. The unexpected mentor had rekindled her passion, broadened her vision, and strengthened her resolve to create lasting change for aging populations. Helen came to deeply understand that no journey, whether of healing, growth, or advocacy, could be walked alone. The strength of community had been a recurring theme throughout her transformation, but it wasn't until this chapter of her life that she fully embraced its power. The community she helped build, both locally and online, became a living, breathing force of support, knowledge, and inspiration. Helen's monthly, Healthy Aging, Delicious Living workshops continued to thrive, evolving into a vibrant gathering where seniors not only learned about nutrition and wellness but also formed lasting friendships. Participants who once arrived with skepticism left empowered, carrying newfound confidence into their daily lives. Helen witnessed the ripple effect as these individuals shared recipes, encouragement, and practical tips within their own families and circles. The virtual storytelling project had blossomed into a dynamic platform where voices from all over the country found resonance. Helen carefully curated stories that celebrated resilience and wisdom, reminding everyone that aging was not a decline but a profound chapter of life rich with experience. She encouraged participants to comment, connect, and uplift one another, creating a digital community that transcended loneliness and isolation. One particularly touching moment came when a participant named Grace, who had struggled with diabetes and depression, credited the group's support for helping her embrace healthier habits and rekindle her passion for painting. Grace's story inspired many, illustrating the transformative power of belonging. Helen also fostered partnerships with local organizations, libraries, churches, community centers, that hosted events and expanded outreach. These collaborations deepened the sense of connection among diverse groups and addressed practical barriers like transportation and access to fresh foods. The community became a network of shared resources and collective resilience. Helen understood that this strength was not accidental but cultivated through intentional listening, inclusivity, and respect. She prioritized creating spaces where every voice mattered, and differences were celebrated rather than silenced. Her leadership style emphasized empowerment rather than control, inviting others to lead and innovate. Through community, Helen also confronted difficult truths about aging, loneliness, grief, and the fear of becoming invisible. The openness of her groups allowed participants to share these struggles without shame, offering solace and solidarity. Healing conversations emerged, reinforcing the idea that vulnerability was a bridge to deeper connection. Helen's own sense of belonging grew stronger, rooted in relationships nurtured by trust and mutual care. This sense of community extended to her family as well. Katie, Michael, and her extended relatives became part of the broader network, participating in events and sharing their own stories. Family gatherings were enriched by shared goals of health and happiness, reinforcing intergenerational bonds. Professionally, Helen saw the community as a catalyst for sustainable change. By mobilizing collective voices, she helped influence local policies supporting senior health programs and nutrition initiatives. Community advocacy proved a powerful tool for addressing systemic barriers and ensuring resources reached those in need. Reflecting on this chapter, Helen wrote, "Community is the soil in which resilience grows. Alone, we may bend and break; together, we stand tall, rooted in care and shared purpose." The power of community became a source of endless hope and energy for Helen. It reminded her that while the journey of aging was personal, it was also profoundly interconnected, a shared story of perseverance, love, and transformation. As Helen's journey unfolded, she found that life's challenges never truly ceased, rather, they evolved in shape and intensity. Just as she had adapted to health crises, rediscovered love, and embraced technology, new obstacles emerged, testing her resilience and deepening her understanding of strength. One such challenge arose when Helen's community center faced sudden funding cuts. The Healthy Aging, Delicious Living program, which had become a cornerstone for many seniors, was at risk of dissolution. This news hit Helen hard. The program was more than a series of workshops, it was a lifeline for countless individuals seeking connection, education, and hope. Determined not to let it end, Helen mobilized her network. She organized fundraising events, wrote grant proposals, and met with local officials to advocate for support. These efforts demanded time, energy, and diplomacy, pulling Helen in multiple directions. Balancing advocacy work with her personal health was taxing. Helen experienced bouts of fatigue and frustration, moments when the weight of responsibility felt overwhelming. Yet, she drew strength from the community she had nurtured. Participants and volunteers rallied around her cause, hosting bake sales, community dinners, and awareness campaigns. Stories of personal transformation fueled their determination, creating a collective push to save the program. This challenge underscored the realities of aging advocacy. Progress was often nonlinear, marked by victories and setbacks. Helen learned to navigate bureaucracy and political complexities with patience and persistence. Another unexpected challenge surfaced when Michael received a diagnosis that required him to slow down and focus on his health. Their relationship, once a source of joyful renewal, now demanded new levels of care and adaptability. Helen embraced this role with compassion, balancing caregiving with her public commitments. This experience deepened her empathy for others facing similar situations and inspired her to incorporate caregiving support into her community initiatives. She organized support groups and resource-sharing sessions, providing a space for caregivers to exchange advice and find solace. Helen's own health also presented ongoing challenges. Despite her improvements, she faced occasional setbacks that reminded her of her vulnerability. These moments reinforced the importance of self-compassion and realistic expectations. She shared these experiences openly, modeling authenticity and resilience for her community. Through these trials, Helen refined her understanding of strength, not as invincibility but as the capacity to adapt, seek help, and persevere. She wrote in her journal, "Challenges are the sculptors of resilience. They shape us, sometimes painfully, into beings of greater depth and grace." Helen also encountered moments of doubt and fear about the future, questions about legacy, purpose, and the meaning of her work. These reflections led her to deepen her spiritual practices and engage in mindfulness meditation, finding peace in presence and acceptance. She encouraged her community to explore similar paths, integrating mental and emotional well-being into their holistic approach to health. Despite hardships, Helen remained hopeful and motivated by the impact of her work. She celebrated small victories, the renewed funding of the program, a breakthrough in caregiving resources, the heartfelt gratitude of participants. These moments reminded her why she began this journey and fueled her commitment to continue. Facing new challenges revealed to Helen the ongoing nature of growth and transformation. Each obstacle was a call to courage, creativity, and connection. Helen embraced this truth with an open heart, ready to meet whatever lay ahead with strength and grace. As Helen stood at the crossroads of yet another chapter, she felt a profound sense of peace mixed with anticipation. The journey she had traveled, from fragile beginnings shadowed by illness and uncertainty to a life filled with purpose, love, and community, had reshaped her in ways she never imagined. The challenges she faced had not vanished, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they became the stepping stones to growth and transformation. Helen reflected on the tapestry of experiences that had brought her here, the initial shock of diagnosis, the deep well of loneliness, the rediscovery of passion through food and health, the unexpected rekindling of love with Michael, the embrace of technology, the power of storytelling, and the strength found in community. Each thread wove a story of resilience, hope, and connection. Her work had blossomed beyond her wildest dreams. The cookbook, once a personal project, had inspired countless seniors to reclaim their health and joy through mindful eating. The storytelling platform had given voice to many who felt unseen, creating a chorus of wisdom and encouragement that echoed far and wide. The Healthy Aging, Delicious Living program had survived funding threats and grown stronger through collective effort, becoming a beacon for holistic senior wellness. Helen's partnership with Dr. Lang had opened doors to new possibilities, allowing her to influence policy and research in meaningful ways. And at the heart of it all was the community, both physical and virtual, that embraced and uplifted one another. Love remained a vital current in Helen's life. Michael's presence was a reminder that new beginnings could arise at any age, that companionship and care could enrich even the most complicated seasons. Together, they faced the unknown with openness and courage, savoring each moment. Helen's own health, while fragile at times, was a testament to her commitment to self-care and balance. She had learned to listen deeply to her body, to honor its signals, and to seek joy even in small victories. As she prepared to step into this new beginning, Helen envisioned expanding her mission further, launching national initiatives, mentoring emerging leaders, and continuing to harness technology to connect and inspire. Yet, she also knew that true success lay not in grand gestures but in the everyday acts of kindness, courage, and connection that defined a life well lived. Helen often revisited the opening question that had sparked her journey: what if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? Her answer had evolved. She understood now that losing everything was a terrifying possibility, but also that human spirit, resilience, and community could build new foundations from the ruins. She encouraged others to find their own sources of strength, whether family, passion, faith, or friendship, that could carry them through dark times. Helen's closing message to her readers, listeners, and community was clear and heartfelt: life is unpredictable, full of challenges and surprises. But love, connection, and purpose can light the way. No matter where you are in your journey, it's never too late to start anew. In the quiet moments of reflection, Helen felt gratitude. Not just for the joys but for the hardships that had shaped her. She recognized that her story was part of a larger narrative of aging in America, a story of resilience, reinvention, and hope. As she looked toward the future, Helen embraced uncertainty with a steady heart, ready for the next adventure, the next lesson, and the next chance to inspire. The road ahead was open, wide with possibility, and Helen was ready to walk it with courage, grace, and an open mind. This was not an ending, but a beautiful new beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?